Imagine a wall of rock so massive it literally cuts a continent in two. For centuries, that was the reality in Europe. But what if you could just punch a hole straight through it? Well, today we're talking about how engineers did exactly that. Let's get into the incredible story of the Gotthard Base Tunnel and how they pulled off the impossible.
When you think of Europe, the Alps probably come to mind, right? Breathtakingly beautiful. But for hundreds and hundreds of years, they weren't just a postcard picture. They were a wall, a massive, impassable barrier that just choked trade and travel, basically splitting the continent right down the middle.
So, for generations, the only option was to go over them. But as Europe's economy started to explode, that just wasn't good enough anymore. A totally radical new question started getting asked. Why go over? What would it actually take to just ignore the mountains completely and drill straight through the heart of the Alps? And look, this wasn't some vanity project. It wasn't just about making things a little faster. Building this tunnel had become a matter of pure economic survival. The old ways just weren't cutting it, and something big had to change, fast. I mean, just think about what they were dealing with. The old routes were an absolute nightmare. You had these winding, zigzag roads that were incredibly slow and super dangerous. Then you've got avalanches and snow that could shut everything down for days, sometimes weeks at a time. Even the trains really struggled with the steep hills. And the big picture? The main economic artery, the one connecting the big factories in the north with the seaports in the south, it was totally clogged. We're talking about a system on the very brink of total collapse. Okay, so the decision was made, they were going through. But the plan they came up with, well, the sheer scale of it was just mind-boggling. It was bigger and bolder than anything anyone had ever even tried to do before. First up, let's talk length. We're talking 57 kilometers. That's about 35 miles, straight through solid rock. When it was done, it would be the longest railway tunnel on the entire planet. And what about depth? At its deepest point, the tunnel would be 2.5 kilometers. That's over 1.5 miles, straight down from the mountain peaks. No one had ever dug a tunnel that deep before. Ever. And when you go that deep, you find heat. A lot of heat. The rock temperature down there was expected to hit 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 degrees Fahrenheit. It's literally hot enough to cook you. A deadly oven for both the workers and the machines. Yeah, and this wasn't a project that was going to be done in a year or two. No way. The plan called for a 17-year marathon of nonstop, round-the-clock construction deep inside the earth. So you take all those numbers, the length, the depth, the heat, and what do the experts think? Well, the world's leading engineers, the smartest people in the business, took one look at the plans and said, nope, it simply can't be done. The consensus was clear. The machines would fail, the workers couldn't survive the heat, and the mountain itself would just crush anything they tried to build.
So if it was impossible, how in the world did they do it? Well, they essentially had to wage a war against nature itself. Deep underground, they came face to face with 3 colossal enemies. Enemy number 1, pressure. Just imagine millions upon millions of tons of rock pushing in on you from every single direction. It's enough to collapse the tunnel instantly. So to fight back, they got clever. In the weaker sections of rock, they didn't just dig a hole. They immediately sprayed a layer of concrete and then installed these massive steel rings, creating a kind of artificial skeleton to hold the mountain up and keep it from caving in. All right, next up was that incredible heat, that 50-degree oven. It was impossible to work in for more than a few minutes. So what did they do? They had to build a life support system for the tunnel itself before they could even start major construction. They ran this huge network of pipes pumping chilled water all the way through the site, basically air conditioning the mountain just to create a survival environment. But maybe the scariest enemy of all was water. And we're not talking about a few leaks here. We're talking about water trapped in deep rock fissures under immense pressure, around 2,900 psi. That's powerful enough to blast through reinforced concrete like a cannonball. And their solution? It was pure genius. They realized they couldn't stop it, so they decided to freeze it. They drilled smaller pipes ahead of the main machine and pumped in freezing liquid for weeks, turning that dangerous, high-pressure water into solid ice. Then the boring machine could just cut through it like it was regular rock. Absolutely incredible. So after years and years of fighting against crushing rock, blistering heat, and explosive water, it all came down to one single, nail-biting moment, the breakthrough. Just picture this. For the better part of 2 decades, two gigantic tunnel-boring machines, these TBMs, started on opposite sides of the Alps. And they just started digging towards each other completely blind, miles deep underground with nothing but GPS and lasers to guide them.
So here's the crazy part. After that 57-kilometer journey, burrowing from opposite ends of a mountain range, what do you think the margin of error was? When those two massive machines finally met in the middle, their alignment was off by just half an inch. A half inch! The level of precision is it's staggering, hard to even comprehend.
And then came the moment. On October 15th, 2010, the giant cutter head of one of the TBMs broke through that final wall of rock. People were watching on live TV as miners and engineers from both sides finally met in the middle, deep under the Alps. That 17-year mission, the impossible mission, was a success. A continent was finally reconnected.
But even after conquering the mountain itself, the job wasn't quite done. The engineers discovered there was one last invisible enemy they had to defeat before a single train could safely pass through. And that final enemy? It was the air. Yeah, the air itself. See, when a high-speed train rockets into a tight 57-kilometer-long tunnel, it acts just like a piston in a cylinder. It creates this massive shockwave of compressed air ahead of it. And this wave would be so powerful, it would literally shatter the train's windows in a deafening sonic boom.
Thankfully, the engineers were smart enough to see this coming. The solution was brilliant. Instead of one big tunnel, they built two separate single-track tunnels, and they connected them with these cross passages every so often, which allows that dangerous air pressure to escape. The scale of this project was just wild, right to the very end. They dug out 30 million tons of rock. That's enough to build 5 Great Pyramids of Giza. The boring machines themselves were nearly half a kilometer long and used as much electricity as 20,000 homes. And the precision? Their calculations were so exact they even had to account for the curvature of the Earth itself. Just wow.
But for all the talk of concrete and steel and incredible machines, this marvel of engineering came at a profound human cost. Over those 17 years of construction, 9 workers tragically lost their lives. Today, a memorial stands at the tunnel's entrance to honor them, a powerful and somber reminder of the true price that was paid to conquer the Alps and reconnect a continent.